Welcome to the unSeminary podcast. Are you looking for practical ministry help to drive your ministry further, faster? Have a sinking feeling that your ministry training didn't prepare you for the real world? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others in pursuit of stuff that we wish they had taught in seminary. Buckle up and let's get started with this week's unSeminary podcast.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. I hope you're having a fantastic week. Welcome to the unSeminary podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for putting us in your earbuds today. Super excited to have Greg Atkinson with us today. Greg, I think, is only the second person to ever come on the podcast twice, and you're in for a real treat today. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be back.
No, Greg's one of those guys I appreciate. You really should be following Greg online, on his blog. Follow him on Twitter. He's a thoughtful leader. Just has a lot of great things to say. He's actually in the middle of a transition, actually starting a new church or going to a new position, which we'll talk about at some point. But today what we wanted to do was actually talk about a book that Greg's got coming out. Now, normally, and I said this last time Greg was on the show, I normally am not the guy that likes to shelf for other people's books, but I would for Greg. So he's got a book coming out called Strange Leadership. Now, why did you call your book Strange Leadership? 40 Ways to Lead an Innovative Organization. Why'd you call it that?
Great question. Well, yes, the book is all about innovation, and it's different from a lot of books on innovation in that it's a biblical study, a biblical view of innovation. Mm-hmm. But it's actually a book that's 6 years in the making.
Wow.
And about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was writing it and working on it, and I was in a pastor's office, and innovation basically is the act of introducing something new. So It's all about newness. Mm-hmm. And I was in an office of a pastor friend of mine in Georgia, and I said, "Hey, do you happen to have a thesaurus handy?" And he says, "Sure," and he grabbed one off the shelf, and I looked up the word new, and one of the synonyms, one of the words for the word new in the thesaurus was strange. And I started thinking about how over the years, when you think of pioneers and inventors and even biblical characters, how when somebody did something new for the first time, something different, something out of the ordinary, they were considered strange. And so true. I said, "Hey, I'm going to call my book Strange Leadership. I want to tell people to embrace being a strange leader."
Nice.
And if you're a pioneer, if you're a trailblazer and you're doing something for the first time and it's totally different and out of the box and people are talking about you and calling you strange, maybe it's not such a bad thing, and maybe years from now they'll ask you how you did it. And so it's all about embracing that strange quality that leaders possess.
Very cool. You know, I was at an event last month with Seth Godin, and he pushed on a similar issue where he said, Gutenberg, so of the Gutenberg press, launched the printing press when 96% of the people in Europe were illiterate. Which is incredible, wow. Right? So you think here was an innovation that no one was asking for. No one was out saying, hey, we need some way to be able to read. That wasn't what people were saying. But that innovation ended up obviously changing the world, literally changing the world, having a huge impact.
I guarantee you he was considered strange.
Absolutely. Yeah, very strange, yeah. Right? And so, you know, I think innovation in the church is something we should be thinking a lot about and trying to wrestle through. You know, how are we going to reach, you know, as our friends over at Life Church say, you know, if you're going to reach people who nobody else is reaching, you're going to do stuff that nobody else is doing. And so that's why I appreciate your book. I think it's a great read. And the thing I love about it is it's broken up into a whole bunch of chapters. There's 40 chapters. You could easily pick it out and say, okay, this is a great kind of training tool for our people. Let's talk about this today. For folks. I just finished reading Walter Isaacson's book. He's the guy that wrote that book, Steve Jobs, and this is kind of his follow-up. It's called The Innovators, and what it was looking at was really about a 130-year period for the invention of the personal computer and the internet, or really the information revolution, even broader than the internet. And the thing that struck me through that was, hey, there's a lot we can learn from those leaders. And then to read your book at the same time was an interesting kind of back and forth from a biblical perspective about what, you know, innovation looks like. But let's jump in. There's a chapter called Inquisition. Inquisition, what is that all about? What's that have to do with innovation?
Yeah, well, Inquisition is at the very beginning of the book, near the beginning, and it's a chapter on prayer, and it's really the heart and soul of the book. It's about if you want to do something new, if you want to be innovative, and when I say innovative, I cover this in the introduction. I'm talking about following the leading of the Holy Spirit. If you want that, Inquisition is about asking God in prayer.
Right.
And there's a great quote that I included in the book. I was at a conference one time at Church of the Highlands in Birmingham, Alabama, with Pastor Chris Hodges, and he said, "You can't delegate prayer," and it just stuck with me. And everywhere that I've taught on innovation over the last 6 years, all over North America, I've said, there is no shortcut to innovation. You cannot bypass prayer. And so Inquisition is a key chapter about the posture in which we approach God, how we come to God. And I share a story of a coworker many years ago. It was nearly 15 years ago that I worked with a coworker, a small group leader named Beth. And I was used to praying, God show us, God lead us, God guide us, God give us, and telling God what to do. And we were in a team prayer, and she said, "God, how can we?" And she asked God a question as if she expected him to answer, like it's a conversation and a dialogue. And so it changed my view of prayer when she just simply asked, "How can we blank?" And I just was stunned, and I thought, I've never heard anybody just ask God a question and wait for his answer. And so that's basically what innovation is about. There's a lot of scriptures I share up front in the book that are foundational to Strange leadership. When we talk about the act of introducing something new, I talk about God being the chief innovator, and I reference Isaiah 43:19, where God says, "I'm about to do something brand new. Can you not see it? It's bursting out." And I talk about God doing new things, and then there's some great scriptures. A great scripture in the Message, which I love checking out things in the Message. It just really refreshes me. But Ephesians 5:1 is, watch what God does and then you do it. And the reason that scripture is foundational to the book is, I say early on in the introduction that 20 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, I was heavily influenced in my own Christian journey by Henry Blackaby's book, Experiencing God.
Yeah, definitely.
And Blackaby talks about joining God where he's at work. And so Ephesians 5:1, watch what God does and then you do it. Join God where he's at work. That's what I mean by being innovative. People sometimes think that when they see a book on innovation that it's about being cool or trendy or the next big thing. And if you take time to read the introduction, you'll see that my heart is, let's just follow the Spirit of God and see where he leads.
I love at the beginning of your introduction, or it might have been the foreword. No, I guess it'd be the introduction because you wrote the introduction, not the foreword. You right off, you say like, "Hey, there's a lot of scripture in this book. I'm just letting you know right up front," because that's what it's based on. Which is, I don't think I've ever read a book that right from the beginning is just letting you know there's a lot of Bible in this. It's fantastic.
Yes.
So now, has there been anything as the book's out there now in the wild, any kind of interesting stories that's come back from people that have read the book or kind of impact it's had on them?
Yeah, there's a ton of people still reading it because it is a long book. This is probably the longest book I will ever write.
It's true. I have it on my Kindle and it's heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, I always tell people I've got a lot of books in me and I'm writing a book right now, but they won't always be this long. This book was over 101,000 words. It's a 388-page book. It took me a full year to sit down and write, and it was a 6-year journey. But this is just very close and dear to my heart. But it won't always be like that. But there are some troopers that have taking it maybe a chapter a day or a chapter a week and have gone through since it's released and have read it and left some great reviews. But what I'm hearing is how people are using it with their teams, with their leadership teams and with their staff. If you go to the book's website, strangeleadership.com, there's a free team discussion guide download. And nice. That's an idea I stole from Andy Stanley. When he released Deep and Wide, which is a great book, he had a free team discussion guide, and I thought that was a great idea. So on the book website, strangeleadership.com, you can download a free team discussion guide. And I had somebody else write it because I wanted another person's perspective. So somebody else read the book and then wrote discussion questions after each chapter. And so there are teams that are going just a chapter a week. And they're reading chapter 1, they're discussing chapter 1, then they read chapter 2, and they discuss chapter 2, and they're using the team discussion guide. And I look forward to when they finish going through that as a team, hearing more stories come in. But it's also a long tail book. You know, I didn't write this hoping just that a few people would buy it right away. I wanted this to be, the reason the focus is a biblical view of innovation is I wanted you to be able to pick this up 5 or 10 years from now and it still be relevant.
Right.
And, you know, I was teaching at a conference recently on innovation, and I asked, what do you think of when you think of innovation? And somebody said technology. And I said, you know, I say in the book that innovation and technology are not synonymous. And out of the 40 chapters, only 2 even mention technology. There's 38 chapters that have nothing to do with technology. And that there was a reason behind that, because again, I want you 10 years from now to pick this up and to read it and it to be founded on biblical bedrock scripture principles and be applicable to you whenever you read it. And so my hope and dream for this, pray with me, is that it becomes a textbook and it's used in Bible colleges and seminaries. I'm actually teaching on it in January at Nebraska Christian College. I'm teaching a week-long intensive class on innovative leadership, and I'm using my book as a textbook, and I'm using Larry Osborne's Innovation's Dirty Little Secret as a textbook, and those two together because they complement each other well. His is very practical. Here's how we do it at my church, and mine is here's some biblical examples and models and principles. So I'm going to use those together to teach, but and I hope the stories keep coming in, but God is using it, and I'm thrilled.
Very cool. Is there a church or kind of a cluster of churches that you refer to time and time again throughout the church throughout the book? You're like, wow, these guys just seem to have it right from an innovation point of view. Is there someone you come back to time again?
I interviewed several church leaders 4 years ago that I quote. Pete Wilson at Cross Point in Nashville. I share some of their story and quote him, but the one I quote the most, strangely enough, was Larry Osborne.
Right.
Back when I was writing this 4 years ago, he hadn't written his book on innovation yet, and so he sent me his answers to my questions, and I put it in the book, and then I read his book, and it's very similar because he was obviously marinating and chewing on it and thinking about what he was going to write. But Larry Osborne is a hero of mine and somebody I really look up to, and so I talk about North Coast a lot, and they have a strategic, prayerful, but yet fearless approach to innovation. And they are not afraid to try something.
Right.
Just today on Facebook, I saw Willow Creek's Global Leadership Summit post a quote by Brene Brown that says, "Without failure, there can be no innovation." And I wholeheartedly agree. And I have chapters where I talk about failure and exploration and experimentation and trying things out. But Larry Osborne is a champion of that and somebody I really look up to. I highly recommend that people check out his book, Innovation's Dirty Little Secret. They talk about, and I talk about it in the book, they talk about every year they go away on a zero-based planning retreat. And this is where the leadership team gets away. And they say, if we were starting from scratch, if we started completely over as a church plant, what would we do and what would not make it? What
Right.
would we not do?
Right.
And they choose to kill or cut things based on that planning retreat. If we were starting over, we wouldn't do this, so let's not do it. And as you know, there's a chapter that's very close to my heart in the book on subtraction and
Yes.
being willing to kill a ministry.
Yeah.
And
a part of what I loved there in that chapter particularly, you said a lot of times we think about innovation, and what we mean is we're adding things to what we're doing. And you said, which it was a great insight. You were kind of pivoting off of, I believe it was Andy Stanley, who was saying, hey,
Yes.
when people get up on a Sunday and talk about we're going to do something new or we're going to make an innovation, everybody's excited. And if you're really good, you might even get a clap about it. But what won't happen is when you talk to little Aunt, Bessie or whatever, when you're going to cut her program, that's when it starts to fall apart for people. Subtraction is hard. Why do you think subtraction is so hard for churches today?
Man, that is the $1 million question. I teach at conferences. I've spoke 8 different times at the Moody Bible Pastors Conference, and I've taught pastors from all over the world. And this is the point of most tension.
Right.
There is something when I talk about. Sometimes I'll say something just to throw it out there and stir the waters. But I'll say, hey, if you're a church that has 300 in worship on Sunday morning and only 30 come back on Sunday night, it might be time to kill your Sunday night service. And that's hard for churches. When you look at a lot of vibrant, healthy, booming, growing churches, they are, and Craig Rochelle, who I quote throughout the book, talks about this a lot in his book, they are very streamlined. They're very focused. Andy Stanley covered this in the 7 Effective Practices of Church Ministry in his book. Andy Stanley talks about narrowing the focus, and churches that are thriving do a few things and do them very well.
Right.
And I talk about this whole concept, which was ingrained in me through the book Simple Church. I'm going to keep plugging other people's books. But Simple Church is like next to the Bible in my house. But basically, they talk about you can accomplish more by doing less. And a lot of churches that I see that cannot get over the 100 hump or the 200 barrier, they are busy every night of the week.
Right.
They've got the Monday night visitation, the Wednesday night prayer meeting, the Sunday morning service, Sunday night service, and that pastor is preparing 3 different messages.
Right.
A Sunday morning message, a Sunday night message, and a Wednesday night message.
Right.
And I talk about this principle that I've had for years of you've only got 100%. You can divide that up however you want, but it's still going to equal 100%.
Right.
Why not give 100% to that Sunday morning message that the most ears are going to hear,
right,
instead of taking a piece out of that pie and working on a second sermon or a third sermon? And so it's a struggle for a lot of people. It's something I love teaching on, and that's why I'm excited to teach this to college students in 2015. But if you can learn early on, and where I first heard this was many years ago at the Catalyst Conference. Andy Stanley taught a message called "The Blessedness of Subtraction." And he said, no ministry has a forever shelf life.
Right.
And that stuck with me.
Absolutely.
No ministry has a forever shelf life. And it's a chapter that I refer back to often in the book. I'll be talking about something totally different, and then I'll throw in, for some of you, you need to go back and reread the subtraction chapter.
Right.
But it's a tough one.
Absolutely. At our church, we've just gone through this. We as we kind of were evaluating this year and looking into next year, there were 2 events that are, I would say, have high emotional value for us, that we've canceled for next year. One, we do and I've actually blogged about it. I've had a bunch of people talk about it. We do this 5K. We've done this 5K that raises money for clean drinking water. And in fact, the organization that we most of the resources from that have gone towards, they came to it last year and they said, this is the largest single a sports event like this that supports our ministry. They're like a $25 million a year organization. And we decided to cancel it for next year. We're not doing it because we found this year we still had good turnout, but it just took a lot more effort to get people to come to. We were having to manufacture energy for it. We were jumping up and down saying, come to this, come to this, come to this. And we realized that's a good sign for us to say we need to turn the corner and say, okay, we need to find something else. We need a brand new wineskin to put that same passion, which is a passion for helping people with clean drinking, get clean drinking water. But we need something new, which for us was a risk because it's positive. People like it. And it raised us a bunch of money every year. And so next year we're gonna have to do something different, and we're working on what, that could be. Or we do this, the other part of it was we do this summer camp, which was a great program, a lot of fun. It kind of is a little bit of the feather in our kids ministry cap. Every year they finish off the year really with that, and it makes they love it and they put a lot of energy into it. But we've said this doesn't help us reach people who aren't from outside our church. It's fundamentally, there's a few, but the majority of it is really just serving our own kids. And so that we don't really want to do that. And so that one, although we're not public on that one yet, so actually both these we're not public on. So I don't know if any people from our church listen, they're going to hear that. But that, I expect particularly on that second one, I think there's going to be a bit of some pain on that, right? We're going to have some leaders say, because people for years have been giving up a week of their family vacation. They've been saying, hey, I'm not going to go on whatever. I'm going to take a week off work and come work for you guys. And so, but again, we're trying to cut that, which is hard. Those are hard decisions to come to. Well, is there anything else? Sorry, go ahead.
You touched on something key. At my last church, we cut something that the church had been doing for years, and I know the pain you're talking about and what that's like. And I've actually cut several things throughout the years, but you said something that I learned from Chris Hodges. I got to spend a lot of time with him back when I used to coach church planners with ARC and go to a lot of the ARC training. But he said, you said in passing, we were having to manufacture energy for something.
Yep.
And Chris Hodges says at Church of the Highlands, they never prop up any ministry. He says if it needs an announcement from the pulpit,
right,
it gets cut.
Right.
If we have to stand up and beg people, please come to this ministry, it's gone.
Right.
And that's a key indicator.
Absolutely.
If you're having to manufacture energy for it. That's huge.
Absolutely. Well, anything you'd love to share with folks before we jump into? Obviously, we want people to get out and get the book. We'll provide links in the show notes. But anything else before we jump into the lightning round for today's episode?
No, I would just say that I saved the best chapters for the end of the book. The last 5 chapters are my favorite, and so even though it's a long book, stick with it. The chapters build upon each other, and I reference each other throughout the book. But keep on trucking it, even if it's a chapter a week. And I know a pastor that did this, took 40 weeks to read the book. Just go a chapter a week and read your way through it. And the team discussion guide is there for you to go through with your leadership team. But my favorite chapters are towards the end, and I hope you'll be blessed by it.
Absolutely. It seems like the book kind of gains momentum throughout. It gets, in the end, those last 5 are execution, situation, vacation, frustration, desperation, and then obviously there's the conclusion of the book. And so it's fantastic.
This is the unSeminary podcast. Stuff you wish they taught in seminary.
Well, let's jump into the lightning round. That's the part of the show where we ask similar questions of folks who are on the show every week. Today, we've got Greg Atkinson, author, pastor, coach, blogger, great guy. You really should get a chance to follow him. Now, because this was Greg's second time on the show, our pattern has been when people are on a second time, we don't do the lightning round. But Greg was like, no, I want to do the lightning round. So Greg, what is a new helpful tool that you've been using in your ministry these days?
Well, I am just starting to use it more and more in a ministry context, but I am learning from other churches how to use it. And I know this has probably been covered on your lightning round before, but it's Instagram. The way churches are using Instagram for promo videos, highlights, pumping up events and the weekend, or a look back at something that happened with a little 14-second edited video, or even pictures. my pastor, Derwin Gray at Transformation Church, he'll do these picture quotes where it's a still shot of him preaching, and then a powerful quote from the weekend message, just to kind of remind people what the summary of what he said was that weekend. And so I've just seen churches really, if you had asked me a year or two ago, I would say Facebook, because I was so huge into using Facebook, and I still love Facebook, but I've seen a lot of creative use of Instagram.
Absolutely. It's funny because I think Twitter I use a lot for interaction with people, but if I got to be honest, the one that I prefer is Instagram, partly because I'm visual, and I follow a lot less people on Instagram. You're one of the people I follow on Instagram. And it's just, I find it really intimate to you see pictures from folks and stuff. It's pretty cool. What about some books that you've been reading? This has been the book episodes. You've listed a lot already, but are there any others that you've read that have kind of caught your attention these days?
Yeah, there's a quote that I say in the book, in my book, and it's a principle that's taught throughout the book, and that's leaders are readers. That's why I quote a lot of books, because I believe leaders should be constantly reading and feeding themselves, primarily and first and foremost with Scripture, but then also with all kinds of books, like the book you referenced by the guy that wrote Steve Jobs. That's that kind of stuff is awesome. But two books that I've read most recently that really had an impact on me was The Carpenter by John Gordon, which I highly recommend, and then one that I'm still working my way through because it's actually longer than Strange Leadership. It's a thick book. And that is The Pastor by Eugene Peterson.
Okay, yeah.
And that came highly recommended. And so I am digging into that, but it's a slow, long read.
Nice. Well, you've got your pulse on a lot of different churches and ministries across the country, really around the world. What are some other ministries that are inspiring you these days?
Well, I want to give a shout out to my new church where I'm joining the staff of, and been watching for a long time and following online. And that is Transformation Church in South Carolina. It's a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. But Pastor Derwin Gray and Transformation Church, they have a vision to be multi-generational and multiracial. And when I first talked to Pastor Derwin on the phone, we were talking about we both have a heart for diversity and for multi-ethnic ministry. I have for years. My best friend is black. This is something I've been passionate about for decades. And he was saying he's writing a new book right now with Leadership Network on this whole thing. But he said, if you fast forward 10 to 20 years from now, if your church does not look like Transformation Church, it's going to be obsolete because of the way America is changing and the demographics are changing. And so I just want to give a huge shout out to my new church, Transformation Church, and I encourage you to keep an eye on us from a distance as we are seeking to reach the Carolinas.
Absolutely. Derwin's a fantastic leader, a great church. That is one of those churches you should keep your eye on. That's fantastic. Outside of Derwin, are there other leaders, inspiring leaders that, if you could get 15 minutes with? Last time you said John Maxwell when you were on the show. Is there anyone else that you'd love to get 15 minutes with?
Yeah, I thought about this, and I am impacted by one of the values of our church and a lot of churches. I first learned this value as a church from Chris Hodges at Church of the Highlands, but that is generosity. And so somebody that I would love to spend time with, because he's just impressed me from a distance, is Bill Gates. The money that he gives to charities and organizations as a philanthropist is just really inspiring. And there are so many people that have made billions of dollars, but they're living large, and they don't really have a heart for others. But and I don't know where Bill Gates is spiritually, but I love his generosity, and I love that he's given to make a difference. And so I'd just love to have a conversation with him.
Absolutely. It's interesting. He's one of those guys. I do think when history's all said and done, as amazing as the technology revolution he's been a part of, I do think when they write the final history on him, his generosity is going to be in the lead. And then it'll be, similar to like there's been other philanthropists in the past that's been their, the Carnegies, where it's like they talk about their generosity in connection with then how they made their money. So yeah, that's cool. All right. So what are you doing for fun these days? What are you kind of doing to, kick back and relax? Obviously, probably these days you're mostly packing boxes because you're just about to start. When we're recording this, you're in the process of moving to transformation. But what else are you doing when you're not packing boxes or writing your next book?
Well, I was going to say the main thing I've been doing this past month is writing my next book, which I'm excited about. Writing is something I do a lot of. It's something that I enjoy, and it's almost like a hobby for me. It's a passion. I think because I read so much that I know John Maxwell talked about how much he reads every day. It just naturally flows out of you to want to download something. You just get inspired and want to write. And so writing is something I'm very passionate about. But right now I'm spending as much time with my family, my wife and kids as I can. And yes, we are in the moving stages and looking to settle back in my home state of South Carolina.
Nice.
And something that's thrilling about that is we'll get to spend more time with our extended family, my family I grew up with and my wife's family, and we'll be back close to family. And so family is a huge priority for us right now.
Cool. Well, Greg, I've really appreciated having you on the show today. You think you're a great leader, and people should pick up Strange Leadership: 40 Ways to Lead an Innovative Organization. We'll have links to all that in the show notes. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, my blog is gregatkinson.com, and my email is greg@gregatkinson.com.
Nice.
And you can reach me on Twitter @GregAtkinson. It's always my name.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. Appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's unSeminary podcast. Don't be shy. We'd love to connect. Check out unSeminary Inbox. You can sign up at unSeminary.com, and we'll send you helpful training resources every week. Plus, you'll gain immediate access to our exclusive members area with tons of resources you can use. Connect with Rich on Twitter @RichBirch or through email rich@unseminary.com. Don't forget to check out the show notes for this episode at unseminary.com. It includes links to what we talked about today and more. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Did you enjoy today's episode? Drop by iTunes and leave a review. Thanks again for tuning in to this week's unSeminary podcast. Join us next week when we'll learn more stuff we wish they taught in seminary.